Hello, Keith Myers here again. Had pretty good response to my first two clips on this series on how to box with Wing Chun, so I thought I'd do a few more. I thought it would be useful to talk about some of the history of how old school boxing transferred to modern boxing. Because remember, my theme here is that if we're going to use boxing to inspire our Wing Chun or to kind of combine with our Wing Chun for a more sparring type element, I think the old school boxing is more appropriate than modern boxing. So, how did old school change to modern? If you recall, old school boxing, they had a wider stance, kind of like a fencer. Their arms were out here, and they had these longer punches. They fought from further out. This was primarily because, in the older rules, grappling was allowed. You could grab a man as long as you didn't grab him below the waist, and you could throw him to the ground or trip him. And a round only ended when a man was either knocked to the ground or was thrown to the ground. And so he lost the round. So obviously, you wanted to stay back here and try to keep from getting thrown by your opponent. So the fight was from further out. Now, under the London prize ring rules, gloves were optional. They've had gloves since the 1700s, but they were always small gloves, like a bag glove or like these, not the big fluffy gloves. London prize ring rules, they fought just as often bare knuckle as they did with those light gloves. So, when modern gloves came about and you got bigger and bigger and fluffier gloves, obviously I've got a big mass on my hand. Now I can hide behind it better. So my stance goes from here to here, so I can use those big fluffy gloves to kind of hide behind them and use them as part of my defense. What also happened was a change in the rules. You had the London prize ring rules, then came the Marquis of Queensberry rules. The London prize ring rules were used for professional fights, and the Marquis of Queensberry rules were used for amateur fights. And the Marquis of Queensberry's rules disallowed any grappling. You could not grab the man, you couldn't throw him. You could clinch, but you could not throw him to the ground. And gloves were required. So now you're using the bigger, fluffier gloves. You don't have to worry about the guy grabbing you and throwing you to the ground with a hip throw. So things became closer and tighter because now I can hide behind the gloves, I can get in closer, exchange blows, I don't have to worry about him throwing me to the ground. Okay? Now, rounds became timed. Instead of the round ending when somebody was thrown to the ground, the round ended at the 2-minute mark. So again, I can stand back here, I can hide behind my gloves, I can fight in close without being thrown to the ground. These two elements, the gloves and the change in the rules, were a major factor in that transition from this old school boxing to the more modern style of boxing. And it didn't happen overnight. Both sets of rules were used at the same time for many years, and it was kind of a gradual transition from old school to what we would consider modern. But if you look in the early 1900s, you can kind of see kind of a melding and a change until we get to more modern boxing. Now again, I think the old school boxing structure and defenses are much closer to Wing Chun than modern boxing, and specifically to Pin Sun Wing Chun. I've done Ip Man Wing Chun. Right now I'm an instructor in Pin Sun Wing Chun under Master Henry Moy, and I'm going to show you some defenses from Pin Sun Wing Chun that are very similar to what the old school boxers did, and so it makes it very easy to make this kind of transition to a Wing Chun boxing kind of approach. Okay. First of all, I wanted to clarify a few things. Some comments were made when I'm standing. One of the maxims of modern boxing is don't be caught on your heels, which essentially means don't have your weight sunk back on your heels, because it's easy to get knocked out that way because you got nowhere to go. Okay? So when I'm standing, my weight's not on my heels. In Pin Sun, we keep our weight in the center of the foot at the K1 point. The K1 point is this spot right behind the ball of the foot, right in the center of the foot. That's the point we pivot on. That's where we carry our weight. So even though when you see me doing my footwork, some of my footwork is more heel to toe than traditional Wing Chun footwork, when I'm settling my weight is over that K1 point. It's not back on my heels. Okay? I want to clarify that. The other thing to clarify is, remember we talked about good Wing Chun structure, keeping our weight centered at the lower tan tien. That's where our center of gravity should be. We don't want our center of gravity to rise up into the chest, and so we start moving from our shoulders. Okay? So this means we need to keep the spine straight. This is part of good Wing Chun structure, a straight spine. Now, I can incline my spine, right? I can move this way or back, and I've still got my two centers aligned, right? It's when I bend my waist, now I've broke that continuity. So again, that's why we want to stay upright and not bend over unless we just absolutely have to, because this breaks that structural integrity, because now my spine is not straight. Another issue to consider, some people have said, oh, well, I'll bob and weave at long range at a distance because it makes me a harder target. It makes me harder to hit, right? The guy can't draw a bead on me. Well, that's great from a boxing perspective. But again, from Wing Chun perspective, we're breaking our structure. Why break our structure when we don't have to? I would argue that if you're going to be evasive, do it with your footwork. Move around. Make him wonder what you're doing with your footwork. Don't stand there and do this kind of thing. Right? Keep a good structure and be evasive with your footwork. Another thing that the old school boxers used to do, and you've all seen this, I'm sure, is this kind of thing. This was called milling. The idea that I'm moving my hands around. Milling was a way to be non-telegraphic. If I stand here, I can still give the slightest tell when I'm going to punch. If I'm already in motion, the guy has no idea when the punch is going to come, right? It's like a carrier frequency, like white noise. It's called milling. And we can do the same thing to be evasive for our Wing Chun. You know, I'm moving my feet around, I got my hands moving, I'm milling to make myself unpredictable when I'm going to come in. Okay? So let's talk about defense more. You've all seen Yip Man Yuji form. There's a section in the form like this. In Pinsun Wing Chun, we have the equivalent in one of our more advanced sets. The whole idea from a Pinsun approach was to be evasive. This motion is getting out of the way and coming back in. The set was actually called Life After Death, in the sense that I thought I was going to get nailed, I was going to die, and then I recover, and now I'm back to life again. So see if we want to modify it a little more to make it good for modern fighting. So what we do in this set is, rather than standing square, going back, we stand this way, and as the punch is coming at me, and I fade back, and I'm springing back again. And this again is right out of old school boxing. The old school boxers did this all the time. It was a fadeaway. I be here, he's punching at me, I move back just enough where the punch falls short. Now it's like I'm a loaded spring, and I spring right back into the guy. So it's this evasive back in again. So he's punching at me, I get back, right back in. Okay? And again, right out of Pinsun. Now, the other thing the old school boxers did was what a sidestep or a slip. So they would step out so the punch would go past. So, and we talked about this last time, if you remember, with a dummy step. So it's the same idea here. The old school boxers would do a slip, and they'd often throw a punch. So we can make that part of our dummy step, where I step out, I use my pox out to cover that punch, hitting at the same time, and I come right back. So this punch is coming, hit, right back at it. I could go the other direction. This punch is coming, so I intercept it, I step out this way, and I'm coming right back. Up here. Okay. Now, Pinsun offers us another option. We have a punch in Pinsun called a Bu Choi. Bu Choi is a backhand strike, but it's not one of these flicky things. It's a powerful backhand strike. And Bu Choi comes off of the forward leg, where we open the stance boom, to generate power, where most things come off the rear leg. So a Bu Choi, the hands are loaded, and it comes across. It comes across and right back to center. So it's not this, and it's not this. It's a circular bam, and it's right back to center. So Bu Choi gives us an option here. If I've done my side step and I'm turning back in, I can use that turn to generate power. So I've hit the guy, and as I turn in, I Bu Choi. So I button evasive, and I Bu Choi. If I show it slowly from the other side, I've stepped, his arm is down for whatever reason. Maybe I've hit him and I've come here. Maybe I've just got it positioned as I deflect. But then as I step back into him, I use this opening to generate power with my Bu Choi. Right? Spins into him. Bam. Very powerful strike. So I step, come right back. It's a cross. Bu Choi. So, essentially that's some basic ideas with defense. Kind of a summary of some history. Hopefully that helps. Next clip we'll get into some more Wing Chun specific hand techniques, and I'll bring in my partner who actually has arms on my phone. Okay.